I want you to think about a 911 operator. Think about the level of stress that one has when you pick up the phone and you don't know if you're going to get a human being who is in cardiac arrest, or if you're going to get a human being who has just been hit by a car, or if you have someone who has an intruder in their home. You never know, right? When you are a 911 dispatcher. Your intake system is not that different. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, where today we're going to be talking about the top 3 ways that you are inadvertently killing your intake system. Now, intake is a topic that we hear a lot of discussion around in law firm world. Anyone that owns a law firm, anyone that has worked in a law firm, that is always one of those topics that people love to dive into because we know that it's the lifeblood of our business, right? If we don't have people to sell to, we as a highly regulated profession, unlike many others, are very hamstrung in terms of how we can get new clients, right? We can't just go out into the street and smack someone over the head and say, hey, you look unhappy in your relationship. I think you need a divorce. Or similarly, we can't walk up to someone, in a commercial building and say, hey, I don't think your landlord is treating you the way that you really should be treated. I think it's time to initiate some action against him or her, right? That's not the way we get clients, right? So we have to generate clients by marketing and getting folks to our door. And then once they're to our door and they're saying, hey, I'd like to meet with you to inquire about your service, that is where intake really becomes the golden goose that lays the golden egg for our law firm. So you're probably wondering, well, what am I doing that's hurting that effort, right? You've read the books. You probably listened to a lot of podcasts about it. You probably have taken some courses like our own intake mastery course that's available on the Law Firm Mentor website. And you probably have got all of the things in place that you believe are going to be successful. And you think at this point, it's just luck of the draw, whether or not the right folks show up in the right quantities and with the right attitude to buy. But there are some very subtle things that you might be doing or might not even be aware that you're doing that are really hurting your intake system. So today we're going to talk about it. So number one strategy, how you are killing your intake system is the failure to have a dedicated person who is incentivized to book consults. Okay, so there's a lot of component pieces there. Let's break it down. First, dedicated person. I think everyone has someone in their law firm that is assigned the role of answering the phones. And it could be 1 or 2 people, right? It could be if the phone rings and paralegal 1 is on the phone, then paralegal 2 is to answer. Or it could be you have a dedicated intake professional, or it could be you have a receptionist person. But if you don't have a person whose sole job it is, exclusive job it is to answer the phones, engage with every potential lead of your law firm, and that's whether folks come in through the phone or they come in through your website or they come in through your intake system. They could come in through social media. However they get to you, you need to have a person that is dedicated to engage with those folks and get those folks scheduled. If you don't, if that person is shared with other departments, you're always going to have an ideological rift that you probably aren't aware of and that they may not even be aware of. See, generally speaking, intake is a sales role, right? They are selling to a person, a prospect, the idea of solving their problem at your law firm. Now, they're not selling the service. We need to be very clear. Your intake people shouldn't be on the phone talking about how great it's going to be when you are the attorney of record in their criminal matter or whatever matter they're calling about. But rather, they are selling the idea of taking the time, taking the money, taking the energy and the effort to meet with your law firm. So how do we get that type of person, that type of salesperson to be selling 1 minute, but then turning around and over here, the next minute they are the receptionist and they are answering the phones and trying to keep clients happy, people who are already clients of your law firm. Customer service and sales are not the same role, right? And people who are drawn into those fields typically don't have the same ethos. They don't have the same interests. They don't have the same skill set. So if you get somebody who's really, really great on the phones, Don't assume that just because they're great with engaging with your current prospects and clients, or rather your current clients, that they're going to be great engaging with your prospects. It doesn't always happen that way. In fact, rarely does it happen that way. So you want to have this person be dedicated, but you also want this person to be incentivized to make sales, right? Now, incentivized to make sales, whenever I say that, people always get nervous and say, hey, 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 in my jurisdiction, we can't do fee sharing, so I can't give them a clip of every new client that comes through the door. And there are lots of different ways that you can incentivize behavior without giving a direct new client equals new fee for employee type of bonus, right? The bonus can be based on percentages. It can be based on a variety of customer service activities. It can be based on the unit number of people that are brought in mass rather than per person. So if Steve signs up, Mary, the intake professional, isn't necessarily going to receive a fee. However, if Steve signs up, Mary is going to get some type of incentive based compensation for that. Now, what that compensation is, we're going to talk about in a whole separate series, all about compensation systems for salespeople and all about compensation systems in law firms in general, right? That's actually one very, very hot topic that we talk a lot about in Law Firm Mentor, and it's covered in our membership site, and people are always asking about it. So I know it's a topic you guys want to hear about. We're going to go there. But for today, just know that you need to have this dedicated person have something to be shooting for beyond just the joy of doing a good job. Okay. And one of the things that I think a lot of us have to get more comfortable with is the fact that even though we all know that we have to compensate our employees, and I don't think most of us begrudge doing that, I think there is somewhat of a resistance around the idea of making sure that you are throwing money at problems in a certain way in a law firm that I think a lot of people find offensive, right? And for a lot of law firm owners, that really derives from the idea that you already feel that you pay well, and you already feel that your people are dedicated to whatever area of law you serve, right? They have some mission to be there other than the paycheck. So when you start saying, well, how am I going to get the behavior that I want? I'm going to put a financial number in front of it. Oftentimes, there's a feeling that that somehow diminishes your employee's dedication to other parts of the job. And that's simply not true. I mean, the reality is that whether the person is in economic need or the person is independently wealthy and happens to be working because they choose to work doesn't really matter. Most people see money as a metric of value in our society. It is how we assess value in our society. Rightfully or wrongfully, it is what it is. So if a person knows that the value that I ultimately bring is demonstrated by dollars and cents, they're going to be more inclined to seek that value if for no other reason than to seek to validate themselves and the fact that they're good at their jobs. And this is basic human behavior, and this is your utilizing your understanding of basic human behavior in order to get to, the outcome that you desire in your law firm. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about strategy number 2. Okay. Strategy number 1 as to how you're killing your intake system, not having a dedicated person incentivized to make sales. Strategy number 2, and this is a biggie, this is failure to conduct weekly sales meetings. Now, I hear this time and time again when I talk to our clients here at Law Firm Mentor, and even when we just talk to people, when we're speaking at conferences, when we are engaging with you online. Me here in the LFM team, we hear this all the time, that people just don't have the time for another meeting. And I think we all have seen the memes out there from the Family Guy, from the King of Queens, lots of different sitcoms. They make this joke about the kind of runaway meeting that people, their sole job is just to schedule meetings so that they can keep people meeting about things that we need to meet about in order to get things done that we never get done because we're always in meetings, right? So this is not the kind of meeting that I am suggesting that you had. This is not just a stick on the calendar to say we have a meeting. These meetings are critical to the development of your intake team and to the growth of your sales through that professional. Okay. There's only so much bandwidth most human beings are going to have to be able to get on the phone and stay on the phone or stay in some form of contact, whether that be social media contact, email contact, etc., with people who are in distress. Okay. I want you to think about a 911 operator, right? Think about the level of stress that one has when you pick up the phone and you don't know if you're going to get a human being who is in cardiac arrest or if you're going to get a human being who has just been hit by a car, or if you have someone who has an intruder in their home, you never know, right? When you are a 911 dispatcher, your intake system is not that different, right? And you might be saying, well, I work in estate planning, or I work in adoption. Like most people call me when they're either happy or they're neutral. They're not in great distress. And that's true. There are areas of law that are not overwhelmed by distress. But if a person is calling a lawyer, that inherently implicates a level of distress, right? We are not thought of as the sweetest people in the world. We're not. We are not thought of as the funnest people. Most people don't like the idea of having to pay what they think of as a large amount of money for our service. They don't like the idea of having to suspend their time, their energy, whatever it is they have going on to engage with you, right? You are a necessity of some sort that is brought about by some issue that they are either afraid of dealing with, i.e., I don't want to die without a will and harm my family, so I have to deal with this. Or it could be something that they're in imminent distress of. I have been accused of a crime. I don't want to be accused of a crime, but I need someone to help me to not go to jail. Or it could be something, more aspirational. It could be, I am a serial entrepreneur and I want to invest in a cannabis dispensary. And I don't know the legalities of that or the logistics of it. I don't know if I should start my own or go in with a partner. And I need advice, right? But there is something that is bringing them to you as the lawyer. And that oftentimes is not fun because writing a big check to get necessary service is not something most people like to do. Okay, so let's just suck it up, Buttercup, and think about that. Now, knowing that people are on the phone, your intake folks are on the phone dealing with the distress that is inherent in having a person have to reach out to you in the first place, they are likely encountering far more emotional, unhappy, unsatisfied, scared, triggered people in the course of their day than even you as a lawyer who is dealing with your clients. Because once your clients get into the zone of working with you, sometimes you have some clients that are in heightened distress all the time. And other clients, they kind of settle into the new normal of, I have to speak to my lawyer, I have to get the advice. There's no new normal for the folks that are calling the intake department, right? They're up here, right? They're on 10. So thinking about that, it's important to recognize that how each individual deals with the stress of another individual's response to them varies from person to person. And it's almost never going to be 100% consistent from person to person that you speak to on the phone. The one thing that can get to consistency for your intake professional is practice. And practice comes in taking a lot of calls, but it also comes in checking in and having people ask questions who were not in the experience, right? One of the greatest things you can do for your intake professionals is actually to meet with them and talk to them every week and say, what are we hearing on the phones this week? What are the major objections that are coming up? How did you deal with those objections? Are you seeing any trends in the types of things that people are asking about, right? Maybe you have a new competitor in the marketplace who's offering something that is outside the norm of what your industry offers. Or maybe you have people who are coming into your vertical who are new competitors who seem to be a better value because they are cheaper, but they lack the experience. Perhaps they lack the tenacity, they lack the relationships that they're going to need in order to foster whatever the transaction is that the person is going to hire you for. And knowing that helps you as a business person not just beat boots on the grounds to get the sale for this person, but overall in terms of how you are structuring your company. So there's a lot to be gained from listening to and regularly talking to your intake people. Another thing that really helps is, and I found this to be universally true, is role playing, right? Role playing, I think, gets kind of a dirty reputation. It feels like this waste of time, something you're just sticking a person through so that you can say that you trained them or that you revisited training. But the reality is, role playing gives you an opportunity as the person who's engaging in it, right? The participant. It gives you an opportunity to think reflexively when you are in some degree of distress, right? Because you are being watched by your boss, or you are being, overseen by a manager, or whomever is going to do a role play with you. Right? There's different options for who should be doing it at different times of your development, right? That's something that we talk about in the intake mastery course. But, ultimately, if you are doing the role play and you hear yourself saying words that you would normally say every day when somebody gives you an objection on price, or the types of complaints that a person would give to you about how the system is structured or what the process looks like. All of those things give you insight. And sometimes you don't even stop to think about it because you are just moving on to the next call, moving on to the next person. That weekly meeting is the time to stop and pause and say, hey, what can I do better in terms of getting this person through our bicycle? Because the people who are in great distress, they're ready to buy right now, whether they're buying from you or someone else. The people who are in moderate distress are ready to buy, but they're willing to take a moment. And then there are people who are not in distress, at least not in the legal sense, and they believe they have the greatest amount of time, but something is compelling them to reach out now. And the better your intake team gets at figuring out what that compelling thing is, the sooner that they are going to get them to schedule an appointment so that you or whomever is selling that person can ultimately get them to become a new client of your law firm. All right, we've covered 2 strategies so far as to how you are inadvertently killing your intake system. And now we're going to cover our third and final, and my favorite strategy that people are using in their law firms that is really harmful and that is inadvertently killing your intake system. So this is a failure to follow up. Okay, the failure to follow up in intake is fatal to the success of your company. We cannot say this enough. We cannot stress this enough, that follow up is where the great overwhelming opportunity exists for you. Because when people come through the door, if you get them to yes, they're your clients, right? If they got to no, or if they got to, let me think about it, more often than not, people don't actually get to know at a consult when they don't buy. They get to, I feel uncomfortable saying no to people face to face, so I'll just ghost you. They get to, I need to think about it because I'm scared to spend that much money, so I'm going to go home and stew in my juices and hope I can figure something out, and maybe hope I can research and find someone cheaper. Or they get to, I really want to do this, but I need to figure out how to make it happen. And I need to talk to a friend. I need to take a loan from a relative. I might need to see what I have available in credit, etc. Right? But they get to some answer other than yes. Those people are your opportunity. And there are a lot of law firms that simply disregard those opportunities, right? If they didn't get to yes at the first consult, they just think, it's a lost cause. But it's not a lost cause. It's not a lost cause. The overwhelming majority of people who hire lawyers are hiring lawyers after having already spoken to that lawyer or having spoken to another lawyer, right? So the one and done, right? The one call close, we all desire that. We all want that. But that might not be the most realistic choice for you. So follow-up needs to be something that you prioritize, because if you just think about it, like if you meet 10 people in the course of a week trying to sell them your legal service, 2 of them say yes right away. One of them says, let me think about it. And then the very next day they get to yes, right? You've sold 30%. You still have 70% of opportunity. Well, what are you doing with that 70%, right? How are you treating them? Now, some of how you treat them will be how you catalog them, right? There are hot leads, there are warm leads, there are cold leads. Presumably, if someone was personally referred and they have an urgent matter, that person would be more of a hot lead than a person who was searching online, happened upon your ad. They might not have even been looking for your ad. Maybe it was a retargeting ad and they were hanging out on social media and the ad just popped up. But something had them, it piqued their interest. They decided, hey, let me look. And in looking, they came to the conclusion, yes, I can do something with this. Let me go meet with this person. And then they heard from you. They had a consultation. It might have been perfectly adequate to meet their needs, but they thought, do I really need to solve this problem right now? And you, as the practitioner, know all the reasons why it's great risk for them to sit quiet and not solve the problem now, right? You know that that neighbor who's pesky and frustrating right now could be the lawsuit that's filed tomorrow, right? You know that that statute of limitations has already started to run on that slip and fall, that they're not that concerned about because they weren't greatly injured. You know that that relationship that is slowly eroding and causing a lot of headaches, but is otherwise not interrupting a person's life, that the longer the person stays in that relationship, the more financial consequences there are for them. And oftentimes, those financial consequences get worse when you're not taking action to protect yourself, to plan your exit, to understand your financial pictures, and so forth, right? So you know of the risk, but not adequately conveying that risk can oftentimes be a product of simply not wanting to feel like you are gilding the lily or that you are squeezing the juice, right? There are a lot of people that feel like, I don't want to take advantage of people. I don't want to exploit their pain. If they're not in pain, I don't want to put them in pain, right? There's a whole sales psychology problem that we have going on with that mindset, but it's very common. People don't want to be thought of as salesy. And so when you are having the conversation on the phone, right, if your intake team is getting them amped up and ready, but they don't quite get to the point of scheduling a consult, that opportunity is still there. And here's what I always tell people. It's not a free-for-all with what you're going to say to prospects on the phone, right? You're still a representative of the law firm. You still need to conduct yourself a certain way. But you can push limits a little bit more when the person is already at a loss, right? If I know that I have, one opportunity to speak to this person on the phone and I didn't get that person over the finish line, then when I call them back and I get them on the phone again, I can be a little bit more aggressive with what I say, because here's the thing, they're already not my client. I'm not losing anything, right? All that I'm doing is missing an opportunity to gain something by keeping my mouth shut. So we want to make sure that we are maximizing opportunity, and follow-up is the way that we do that. And follow-up is the way that we typically see law firms really start to take off. When you start building out sales systems where you're not just having better conversations, building out better scripts, meeting weekly with your team and actually role playing and following up on how they are speaking to folks and what the tonality is and all of those things. But when you really start following up and make it a full-time job to not just deal with the folks who are coming in, but deal with the folks who are not quite yet out of your ecosystem, but could be very soon, that's where the magic is. All right, everyone. I'm Allison Williams, your law firm mentor. You've been listening to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. I will see you on our next episode.